Hey there everyone, I finally have the X-Men 97 Marvel Legends Wave 2 figures, which only just released in the country, I believe last month or something. The show does wrap up this week, so there's no better time than now to check these out. These figures appear to be a lot easier to find in stores here in NZ compared to that first wave. You can find these guys at most of the NZ retailers here for around 40 to 50 bucks depending on where you look. If you missed it though, I managed to get the entire set here for just $30 per figure through a mystery unboxing. It's an interesting wave that we've got. Again, the show is out by the time of this recording and it should be wrapping up now, so we do have some context for who some of these MISC characters are, whereas when this wave was originally announced, I think maybe in November or December, I wasn't too sure who some of these characters were. I think it's obvious which ones I had questions about. No spoilers throughout this video though for those who are behind. We've got 3 of the main team members here with Cyclops, Jean and Nightcrawler, 3 members of the team that I was really hoping to get, so it's great to have them here to add to my collection. And then we've got 3 odd strange inclusions of Magneto, Goblin Queen and X-Cutioner. My original plan was to only get the main trio here and to skip those others, but like I said, I managed to find these guys for a $20 saving per figure under the strict condition that I get it as a random assortment. I decided to take a gamble and I added 6 of them to my cart, assuming that the retailer would send me a complete set sealed in a box, and it turns out I was right. I was debating on whether or not I wanted to maybe just return these 3 or something, but I decided to open them. This means that I have both waves complete in my collection, and I do have a few thoughts, both positive and negative, on these 3 inclusions, so it'll make for a more balanced video. Let's just get into the review. Out of the box here we have the 6 action figures and all of their respective accessories. There's quite an upgrade here as far as the accessories go, which was one of my main criticisms from the first wave of figures. Multiple alternate heads here and weapons, and even a couple of dynamic display options too. The figures all look pretty good as a complete set. As individuals, I think that some of them kind of fall apart a little, but I'm not sure how this compares to wave 1 just yet. I do want to start with Cyclops because he was one of my more anticipated releases. For those new here, I've only started recollecting Marvel Legends around this time last year, and my entire goal has been to have a display of my favorite Marvel heroes in their what I consider to be definitive looks. So here we have a cartoon Cyclops at a very affordable price and easier to acquire than some other ones. That VHS figure, which wasn't sold here in NZ mind you, featured some cell shading effects, but otherwise the figures are very similar, and I did have that one on my watch list for quite a while. I will say that while I really do love this figure, the hair feels a little off color-wise in comparison to the source material. I wish it was just a little bit darker, but that could be something that I do for maybe some customs. His utility belt is actually partly molded into the figure's torso here. Some really nice bright colors like I usually compliment in all of my other videos. I just love the vibrancy that action figures can have when they're being based on cartoons or comics, which is why I tend to kind of skip the movie adapted figures. And actually, back to that head, the visor is also a little off to me. The yellow doesn't match the yellow for the belt, instead it's like a gold plastic. It's not bad from afar, but it is quite noticeable for me once you're up close. But I can't fault it too much though. Again, this was one of the figures that I was really gunning for when I started recollecting action figures again, so I'm just thrilled to actually have a Cyclops for my displays. For Scott's articulation, he's pretty great and easy. Nothing is really prohibited here. We have full head movements and really great arm movements with that clavicle joint. We also have some rotates and some bends here in the elbow. It looked like his lower arm had articulation, but it doesn't. Not to worry though, his hand does move around, and the same can be said for the other side because it moves the exact same way. Torso movement, we've got some bends in the ribs and some movements here at the waist. Full leg movement, which allows us to move outwards and inwards. Some rotates here too for the upper leg and double bends at the knee, but the figures are all pretty tough straight out of the packaging. Movements for the legs, which can rotate around, and feet movement as well. Standing test, he's pretty good to work with actually, and the accessories are just enough to satisfy me, plus one incredible inclusion. You've seen his open hands during this video. He also has a pair of closed fists. He also has this pretty cool eye blast gesturing hand, only included for the left hand, but if you take a closer look at mine, it almost looks like it's been AI generated or something, because his thumb appears to be split down that middle there. It looks identical to his index and middle finger there, so it does throw off the design for me. We also have this alternate expression here where he's really mad at someone, pretty easy to swap over the heads, and again, fresh out of the box means that the joints are just a little tight here. Looks cool, but you can also see that the visor has been removed from this piece and left open. That's because we also have this really great blast piece which can attach onto that visor, and turns out not every Cyclops figure even seems to include something like this, so I'm really happy to see it here. It's pretty cool, though I have to assume it is a repeat. I doubt it was made just for this figure. It has some texture on one side of the piece and just a flat surface on the underside. Insert's pretty easily, though it does feel like it would prefer to be one specific side up always. It's got a certain groove that sits better this way. The best part about this piece honestly is that standing test, again, he holds up really well in that position. There's no balance issues here, and I really thought it would kind of make him top heavy, but I'm quite surprised by this. So Cyclops is great. He is a standout figure for sure, one that I am deeply satisfied with. I've got a couple of issues on the weirder finger problem and some paint that I wish was different shades, but I love this figure regardless. Definitive Cyclops for my collection, and now we can move on to Jean. Jean is also a pretty solid figure. Her design has been so different in many adaptations that I don't really have a personal preferred look in mind when I think about her, so I was really happy to see that I was immediately sold on this look to be my definitive Jean. She oddly enough uses a female body mold that is different from the other women in the line. It's different from Goblin Queens, who uses the same one as I believe Rogues and Storms, but more on that in a sec. I love that face sculpt on Jean here, and the vibrancy of the red coloured hair really stands out against the colours of her costume the most. Signature X symbol for the belt buckle, and something I do wish we had was some more definition for the colours for those indents and lines on her suit. You can see them at least, which is fine, but I would have liked to have seen some more cartoony black paint here. Again, it might be something for me to consider doing for customizing, but maybe they were trying to steer clear of that because it could have fallen into that cel shady thing that people didn't like from those VHS ones. I mentioned that the body mold was different. She doesn't have any rotates in the torso, which is usually here at the lower chest. Goblin Queen does feature this body mold though, so just something I thought worth mentioning. Other unique details for her are her ponytail and her shoulder guards. The ponytail can actually be removed, it's just a peg in there, so that's handy. It means that you can move it around depending on your pose and display for her. Her shoulder guards kind of remind me of the ones that Wolverine has from Wave 1. You can see that one of mine though is a little loose compared to the other one though, but this actually means I can show you how they've achieved this. It's just a strap that's wrapped around the joint inside there, so it's not actually coming away or anything, thankfully. For Jean's articulation, she achieves everything that's open to her. Full head rotates and some shoulder movement, but no clavicle movement here. Bends and rotates for the arm and bends in the elbow. Double bend joint here as well. Her hands have some bends and rotates, and we can say the same thing for the other arm because it does move the same way. Jean features rotates in the hips here, and some extra movements as well. Legs move outwards and inwards, and some rotates in the upper thigh, and double bends in the knee here as well. And finally, we have some feet movement too. And standing test for Jean, she's a little finicky, but not too bad to deal with really. Accessories are decent enough, but nothing spectacular unfortunately. You've seen her closed fist, and I want to say her ability hand maybe during this review. She's also included with a pair of open hands, pretty nice. We also have an alternate expression with her hair down rather than tied up in a ponytail, and I love this piece. It looks amazing, and I can't decide which one I prefer to be honest. Swapping them over like Scott, it works the same way, and now we have this nice alternative look. The only thing to keep in mind here is that articulation is lost a little with this head, but still, design-wise, I do really love this as much as the other one. So Jean is really solid, but I do wish she had more for the accessories. I would have loved to have seen some power effects here, but it looks like Hasbro have never actually done that for her in the past. I think this figure is much better than that VHS release. Face sculpt-wise, I'm impressed with this, and color-wise, I'm really satisfied too. She looks great paired up with Scott, and another great addition to my collection. Next here is Nightcrawler, and realistically, he was my most anticipated figure. I just never thought that we would be getting a Nightcrawler figure, a fan favorite character, but still a character that feels pretty underutilized in some adaptations. I just really thought that we would see every other mainline hero before we would get to him, so I'm ecstatic to see a Nightcrawler figure released here, but he's not without his flaws. Hasbro have actually made quite a few Nightcrawlers in the past, and I like this one just as much as the others, but the face I'm not really sold on yet. I think the eyes are just a little too small compared to the source material, and translating those blue highlights in the hair as seen in the series is a really tough thing to do in toy form, because in the show it's more of a stroke of color on the outside, and here it's black paint over top a blue molded piece with some of the color peering through all over. Still a solid looking figure though, and complete with some really special molds just for this character in regards to his hands and his feet. Body mold is a bit strange. You can see that the upper torso here uses these two strips that make his biceps, and they overlap and extrude out a little. It does show how some of the molding here works, which is kind of neat I suppose. A genuine problem that I do have with mine is plastic material that's peeling from the elbow there. It just needs a little bit of adjusting on my end, but it's always weird when this occasionally happens with toys. Tail articulation here as well. There's no bendy wire or anything, not that I expected it, it's just natural instinct for me to think that parts like this will have some form of articulation and movements. You can at least move it around for your display, you just can't reshape it. Articulation is good, full head movements like the others. His arms move outwards but no clavicle movement here either. Rotates for the arms and bends in the elbow. I think his lower arm might have some articulation as well, and his hand also has some movements here, and the same can be said for the other arm, which moves the same way. We've got some rotates here in the torso and bends for the upper torso, so he is pretty agile. His legs function the same as the others that we've looked at, with movements for moving outwards and rotates in the upper leg, double bends in the knee, and then some feet movements as well, and standing test, he's very easy to play around with. Unfortunately, the accessories are lacking in my eyes, just some hands and an alternate expression. Throughout this review, he's had these open grabbing hands. He also comes paired with these closed fists. His alternative expression is a lot angrier of a look. I really wish his neutral expression then was a much happier one instead, because I think it would better contrast these two differences. Swapping them over, just as simple as the other ones that we've looked at, but I think I do prefer the other expression compared to this one. I really love Nightcrawler, like the other figures, but the accessories do really let me down here. There's no teleporting effects piece here, a different look for the alternate expression would have been ideal, and also no swords is a genuine bummer. He's used those swords quite a bit in the series. At the very least, those could have just been repeats from the previous releases, so I do like this figure as a standalone, but I wish he came with all those extras that we're used to get with him. In fact, personally speaking, I think I would have preferred the accessories that I've listed here rather than any of the ones that we did get. But now it's time to move on to some of those odd inclusions. This is Magneto, who is appearing here in a much more accurate costume to the show than compared to that first release, but at the same time, it is weird to already have repeats or remakes of characters when we don't even have a full team yet. So I think Magneto here was immediately thrown into criticism from the community because we're all waiting on a Jubilee or a Morph, a Beast, maybe Forge or a Mrs. Sinister. I personally, like many others, would always prefer newer figures or newer characters over some remakes, but I do love the face sculpt on him here though, and that expression is really solid for Magneto. The first release didn't include an alternate head without his helmet, so I can already see the appeal here for this guy. Detail wise, the figure is really good actually, but for me and many others, I just don't really care for that outfit compared to his classic look, which we got in Series 1. The colours are really tough to translate from cartoony form to toy form. I think it would have been a better fit if it looked more like it came straight from the cartoon, but the flat purple that's been chosen here really throws off the design. His cape features a peg at the back there, and there's a hole there as well. It just slips into that to keep it locked into place, but the funny thing is, the collar is really far out past that neckline there. It looks kinda off when you're doing some posing. The real appeal here for me was to compare it to the previous releases, since again this is the first remake that we're ever having from this specific line. The one thing that I really wanted to do here was swap over those heads as well. It's pretty easy to remove this, plus it means that the cape can come off as well for more exploration in the video. Swapping the heads over like so, I think it looks really good actually. Again, I can definitely see the benefit here of doing this, and now that we have the purple body on its own, which actually makes the articulation really easy to cover, let's take a look at everything. Magneto can do just about everything. He's got full head movements despite the seemingly large hairpiece there, full arm movements in the same bends and rotates areas that we've already covered here, including clavicle movements, my personal favorite. He can also move the exact same way for the other arm, rotates in the waist and bends in the torso as well. The legs can move outwards and inwards, and we also have the same rotates and bends here that we're used to seeing by now. If I put the cape back on like so, he can still move around the same ways, but back movements have now been prohibited and the head can't really turn around anymore. Standing test, he stands pretty well actually. His accessories I think again are really lackluster actually, but they are much better here than the first release, hand swaps and an alternate expression. He's had fists this entire time, but you can swap those out for some open palmed gestures. His alternate expression is a very angry look, which does seem more fitting for him, and actually having two heads here does mean you could definitely have an unhelmeted Magneto in his classic look, which I think I will actually do for my displays. Yeah, overall, Magneto is fine. It's a good figure, but it's one based on a design that I've just never really cared for to begin with. That's not Hasbro's fault though. I like my traditional looks, and the same complaint that I had with the last figure is also applicable here. I wanted to see some magnet power effects. That said, the face sculpts are really good, and I love the fact that we have two heads here so I can swap one over onto my classic look. This here is Goblin Queen, a character that I was unfamiliar with before watching the series, so this was initially a figure that I was interested in skipping, but I did fall in love with those accessories included here in comparison to say Nightcrawler or Magneto. I am pretty easy to be swayed one way or another depending on the accessory inclusions. Another great face sculpt here though, and amazing hair coloring and molding on this figure as well. Really impressed with how good the figures who I considered skipping actually look. She uses the same body mold that Rogue uses from the last wave, where we have some rotates in the upper torso rather than rotation in the waist, so it does make her feel distinct compared to Jean. The cape here is pretty cool, uses that same peg as Magneto to stay locked into place, but the molding here is unique to her. It's all tattered at the end there. And something that I thought worth mentioning was there was something really different about this figure compared to the show, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I realized it's her legs. The Legends line here has some black paint over her legs, so it looks like it's all covered, but in the show her thigh is left exposed in her costume design. It's interesting because at first I thought this was maybe to make the toy more more appropriate based on the kids show, but then I learned that actually the show is targeted to the older audience. I wonder if this was maybe a concept change or a last minute decision either made by Disney or Marvel or maybe Hasbro. If you really wanted to though, you could always just paint over this and customize it. I love the small details here as well, like the nail polish on her fingers. I was really impressed with Madeline here. Articulation wise, she can move her head around, but only about as far as that hair will let us. It feels like you could possibly get a full 360 spin though if you really want to push it. Bends and rotates here in the arm, but there's no clavicle movements. Double bends in the elbow joint there. She's also got movements in her hands. The same can be said for the other arm because it does move the same way. I've shown her body articulation in the upper torso here already, so as for the legs, she can move them outwards and inwards just fine, rotates in her lower thigh, and double bends in the knee joint, and finally some feet movement as well. And if these feet here look tough to stand, well they usually are, but I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that even on the first take, she stood like a pro, first time the entire recording. Usually it goes more like this, regularly messing around until I finally get something that actually works. Accessories though, pretty nice and a pretty good change compared to the other ones that we've looked at. Open witch-like hands for the duration of this video, and I do have to hold on to her hair because she won't stand now. The addition of these fists, just like everyone else in the line so far. We've also got this baby, which is really insane with the amount of detail here. I was convinced that the head would be able to maybe move around, but it is truly just one static piece. Really impressed with this piece, and it feels really nice as well. And then we have some power effect pieces, which are repeats, yes, but she is one of the only 2 mutants to have something included like this, and across the entire line, I think it might just be her, Cyclops, and Gambit that have any resemblance of their mutant abilities in accessory form. Obviously Wolverine has his claws as well though. These are the exact power blast pieces that I wish Storm was included with from the first wave. Goblin Queen is actually pretty surprising overall. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty glad that I didn't skip out on this figure actually. Her molds are really interesting, the accessories are a highlight for this wave as well. The best thing an action figure of a character that I'm unfamiliar with can do is sell me on that character, and this toy made me more interested in the character of Madeline. A highlight for the wave for me for sure. Then lastly we have here the X-Cutioner, another interesting figure inclusion because he was once again a character that I was unfamiliar with before starting the series. Disappointingly, he is the least involved character in this wave so far, appearing in only one episode as an antagonist and then disappearing shortly afterwards. So it's an odd inclusion to say the least. But he is a pretty cool action figure, I'm not gonna lie. He's really big and stocky with his body molding, which is great to see because it just makes it feel more distinct when you've bought 6 figures in one go, and most of them do end up reusing the same parts as one another anyway. His head's really special, kind of like a Ned Kelly dome-like piece, and as for his character extras, he's got a sash here which is really nicely painted. It does interfere with his articulation a little though. The same plastic material that's used on Iron Man toys are used for his arms here, which does contrast the material that's used for his body. And really, the figure that he reminded me of the most was Bishop from Wave 1, just a really cool big action figure kind of guy that uses up all of the space that he can, and costing the same price as the smallest figures of the series as well, although height-wise, I don't remember Bishop actually being this tall in comparison. Articulation wise, he's pretty limited. He's got some slight head movement here, but not to the extent of the other figures. His arms can both move up about halfway since the clothes do get in the way there. He's got no clavicle movement either, but we do have some rotates and double bends in the elbows. We also have some movements in the hands here as well. The same thing can kind of be said for the other arm, but again, the sash and the different armor pieces kind of get in the way here. He can rotate in the waist, decent enough movements here, but again the clothes, they might get in the way there. And then it's the standard movements for the rest here. Movements in the legs and bends and rotates in all the same places, and feet movement here as well. And standing test, he's been the easiest one so far just because of how big this guy is. Accessories are really awesome as well. First we have the Sentinel tech piece which you can slip over his arm. It's a special gun and it's made from a rubber-like plastic material. We've also got this really cool steampunk looking gun. There is this strange piece of plastic that's attached to the end here that is removable, and I'm pretty sure it's just trash and it might have just been here to protect it in the packaging, but it's a really strange piece, so I have kept it for now. Like, it's a fully enclosed plastic piece. His gun looks really cool, kind of looks like a cowboy's rifle with some future aesthetics. And then finally we have these 2 extras being spear-like weapons. They both also have clips so that they can be slotted into the gun for storage. And the gun can also be equipped onto his back, which you probably noticed that during the video, and if you wanted to, the spears can also be equipped here as well. One of his hands is already in a trigger mode, so the gun does fit in there like so, but the clothes do make it pretty tight to have his other hand holding onto that weapon. His spears can fit in either hand, though here you're going to have to utilize the peg being put in between his fingers. Fits perfectly well in the other hand though. And the Sentinel tech, it just simply slips on. It's not as secure as I would have liked it to be though. I thought it might be better off on a different arm, but it more or less just gets the same feeling. X-Cutioner is a pretty interesting figure overall. While the placement here may be odd due to the lacking screen time, I really like the strange inclusion for some hefty space that he occupies here. Bigger action figures just feel more worth the price in my eyes, and he contrasts pretty well to those other figures included, and the interesting accessories on top of that really help to seal the deal. He and Goblin Queen genuinely went from my least interested to probably some top picks. That's my look at the wave altogether. I'm feeling pretty satisfied with this wave all in all actually. Expanding the definitive looks for 3 of those characters is really great, and I suppose having 3 odd new inclusions helps to add a bit of variety to the series and cement itself in being based on the brand new show specifically. Accessories altogether are an improvement here compared to the first one, with 4 of the 6 figures here including alternate heads. The hands are nice as well, even if they all just use fists, but the mutant ability power inclusions are important for me and my display options, and I wish we had some more here. I do wish that some of the figures weren't lacking in that department. Nightcrawler definitely could have used something a bit more special to make him more worthwhile for those who already have a Nightcrawler in their collection. Here is the main lineup of heroes that I have so far in my series, all of the X-Men 97 figures and the inclusion of Beast from the retro line, because it doesn't feel like we're going to be getting an X-Men 97 Beast for quite some time. Overall with the second wave, I'm feeling pretty satisfied with only Magneto being the one figure I think I could easily live without. Thank you for watching this belated review. I hope that you enjoyed it. Liking this video and subscribing here does help to support more videos like this in the future, and I hope to see you all next time.